Hey guys, welcome to week 3 of our winter challenge. We're approaching the halfway mark. Obviously at this point now the challenge starts to get a little bit more difficult, but for slightly different reasons. As we mentioned in the beginning of the challenge, but now we're going to kind of get to the point where the excitement has potentially died off a little bit. Your motivation levels are probably lower than they were in the beginning. And now we need to switch over to discipline and consistency in making sure that we can keep those levels of motivation high and make sure that we stay strong through the rest of the challenge. A great way to do that is for us to make sure, which is what we're going to talk about today, is to make sure that we have some goals in mind. So what we're going to do today and our health challenge going forward this week is going to be to set up some smart, realistic goals, performance-based and health-based, just to ensure that we're working in a direction that we can see on a short-term basis and a long-term basis. If we don't have these goals in place, it's very easy to lose our way and become demotivated because you feel like once the excitement and motivation has worn off, what are we really training for? So here's what I'd like you guys to do for our health challenge for this week. As I said, it's really important to have these goals set up. So we're going to look at two goals. We're going to look at a health-based goal, and then we're going to look at a performance-based goal. And in each of those categories, we're going to have a fairly short-term goal and then a slightly longer term goal. So the performance-based goal, that's pretty simple, and that's kind of something that you can determine by yourself, in yourself. If you've done any activities throughout the challenge that's potentially urged you to gain strength or gain momentum in a certain area, that can be the goal. For example, when we did the 1.6 mile runs, maybe you had to stop and walk halfway through the run. So your goal in a short term could potentially be to try and complete the 1.6 kilometers or a 1.6 kilometer run without stopping and without walking. For some of the guys who are a little bit fitter, you could potentially set yourself a goal to say you want to complete a 5K run without stopping and walking. For some of the guys who are a little bit more concerned about strength, obviously we're doing our classes on a weekly basis. We're currently in a deadlift, bench press and a front squat cycle. So your short-term goal could be trying to improve and increase your numbers within those 3 lifts. The goal is to be realistic when it comes to setting these goals. We want to kind of make sure that if you only just started running, you don't necessarily want to see if you can complete a marathon within a couple of weeks from now. We want to make sure that they set up in a way that's realistic. So our short-term goal, which is about, let's say 3 to 6 weeks from now, we want to make sure that that's attainable based on some of the activities that we've done. And then our slightly longer-term goal, that's one where we could potentially shoot a little bit higher, but then obviously throughout the remainder of this challenge, we're going to set up some actionable steps that's going to help us achieve that goal. So that's the performance-based goal. Obviously, then moving on to the health-based goal, which is to some extent a lot more important, because I think a lot of us are doing this challenge to potentially change our body composition. We potentially want to drop a little bit of weight, maybe pick up a little bit of muscle and invest in our future health starting from now, thinking ahead. So for the guys that did the weigh-in, obviously that's a great start. You've got a point now. You know where you are, you've got a benchmark, and we know what we want to achieve or where we need to get to, and we can use that as a measure of tracking our progress. For the guys that didn't, you could still have a goal in mind. It could be a weight-based goal, but I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about why I want to avoid using the scale as my measure of health performance. So let's say, for example, your goal is to lose weight. Now, a lot of the time we become a little bit obsessed and we hop on the scale on a daily basis. And we become very demotivated when we quickly learn that our weight isn't changing at all. So this is normal. It's not realistic to expect your weight to drop, because essentially what we're measuring is measuring our total weight, which has no real relevance in how we look and how we feel. So your weight can fluctuate for a number of reasons. The amount of carbohydrates and sodium that you've consumed. We all know when you have a holiday where you consume a little bit too much, or even after a weekend, you come back and you look on the scale, all of a sudden you've picked up 2 or 3 kilos and these alerts go off in your head saying what happened. Essentially what's happening is your body's just retaining a little bit more water due to the sodium and carbohydrate intake. That weight will shed within a couple of days from there. Time of day fluctuates your weight. The weight of food and drink, so simple, but it plays a role. So obviously weighing yourself at the end of the day, you're going to be slightly heavier than you are at the beginning of the day. Our hormones play a big role as well. Also our stress levels. When we stress, we release cortisol, and that also makes us retain water. And that plays a huge role in weighing a certain amount, and potentially at the beginning of the week versus the end of the week. And again, the biggest factor here to think about is how that plays on our psychology. So obviously what's happening is when you train, for example, even if you're not doing what you would consider hardcore weightlifting, just by moving your body, doing simple air squats, you're potentially building muscle. If you're doing that along the lines of increasing your protein as well, you're building muscle. Muscle weighs more than fat, so therefore your body composition is improving. So you're losing body fat, but you're increasing overall weight and you become despondent. Whereas what we should actually be looking at is ourselves taking progress photos on a weekly basis. The best feeling as well is fitting into a pair of clothes that you haven't worn for a long time and all of a sudden it fits. But essentially what I'm getting at here is just urging you guys to make sure that we're not using the scale as a measure of progress, but rather taking the progress pics, basing it off of how we feel, basing it off of how we look, and obviously trying to get into those pair of jeans that hasn't fit. So we're going to offer you some guidelines throughout the week on basically ways that we can set up these goals, smart ways. For some of us, we know already. We know my goal is to lose 6 kilos by the end of the challenge. If that was from the start, for example, and you've got it down, you know exactly what you want to achieve. You're putting in the steps to get there. For some of us, it's a little bit more vague, like losing weight. So throughout the week, we'll give you some guidance and give you some help in making sure that we are setting these goals realistically, but at the same time, we're having realistic expectations in what's possible. So, I mean, if we're looking at unrealistic goals like we see on Instagram, those models and those bodybuilders, those are to some extent very unrealistic for average Joes and average human beings. Firstly, that's most likely Photoshop. The guys are probably taking substances they shouldn't be taking. And also, a lot of the time, that sort of body composition comes with a lot of deprivation, not sustainable, and it's pretty miserable. So in addition to that health challenge, what we're going to do next week is we're going to talk about plateaus. And one of the aspects around plateaus is going to be tracking our food, which is not necessarily something I condone. Not condone, but I wouldn't really push forth because it can become quite intense. But it is good to sort of just get an idea of the portion sizes, because we often overestimate or underestimate the amount of calories we burn versus the amount of calories we consume. So in addition to our goal setting for this week's health challenge, we are also going to track our protein intake for the next week. So we can do that by downloading MyFitnessPal or any other tracking app. And basically what I would like you guys to start doing is potentially logging your meals, all of your meals. Hopefully from last week, we said we wanted to try and have a protein portion at every meal. So logging the meals, having a look at that protein content at the end of each day, and then obviously sending that through to the group just to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable. Now, I think I briefly touched on it last week as well, but what we're looking at is we're looking at roughly 1.8 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for example, if I weigh 90 kilos and I'm looking at 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, my target would essentially be 180 grams of protein per day. Now, for those of you that don't know as well, if you take a chicken breast and you weigh that chicken breast and it weighs 200 grams, that's not 200 grams of protein. That's 200 grams of chicken, which contains many ingredients. You can also just use Google and be like, how much protein is in 200 grams of chicken? It'll give you the answer. So you can go as far as to download MyFitnessPal, which will make it a little bit easier. But if you want, you can also just write it down, log it in a journal, log it in your notebook. The goal is just to be keeping track. And we're going to get into more detailed tracking next week. But for now, the focus is just on protein. So if you're having a meal and it doesn't contain any protein, you don't have to worry about tracking, but we want you to be mindful of the amount of protein that we're taking in on a weekly basis. Just to finish off the health challenge, guys, as I said just now, it's all about our expectations. If your expectations are potentially too high, we're always going to be disappointed. If we raise the bar too high and we've set something for ourselves that's slightly unrealistic, we're always going to be at a level of dissatisfaction because it's potentially too difficult to attain. So that's where we're going to come in this week. We're going to offer you some guidance. We're going to do some one-on-ones with you guys. We're going to encourage you to approach us as coaches and just quickly have a conversation around some of the issues or some of the things that you want to ask about your goals to help give us some direction. The most important thing is by the end of this week, we want to have a short-term and a long-term performance-based goal and a health-based goal. And let's share those goals with each other on the group. Let's keep ourselves accountable. Let's make sure that we're all working towards something in common. Okay, moving on to our physical challenge days of abs. If you log on to Octave now, guys, if you go to your workouts tab and you select the workouts tab, it's going to show you CrossFit Gritbox. That's where you can see the CrossFit workout and the Gritbox workout. And then I've added a new tab below that called Winter Challenge Abs. Every single day, we're going to post an ab workout. And the goal for the challenge is to do that workout every single day. So Monday to Sunday, we are going to do an ab workout. They range between 5 minutes to 10 minutes. It's not going to be much longer than that. Even if you're not coming to the gym to train, we encourage you to then just do it at home. It's not going to require any crazy equipment or anything like that, so you can do it wherever you are. But we've got 7 days of abs. Pull your friends and family in with you if you're at home and doing it there. But otherwise, let's get some groups together at the gym after class. Let's do these ab workouts and let's make sure that we're working hard next week. Just quickly on that point, just another myth to bust. what we try and think of is, if I want to burn belly fat, I must do ab exercises. It doesn't work like that. Everybody is different in the way that they lose weight and the rate that they lose weight. So you'll see some people carry a little bit more weight in their hips and their thighs, in their lower stomach. Some people carry a little bit more weight in their upper body with skinny legs. Everyone's different. But in order to get abs, it requires us to lose body fat overall, and then depending on your genetics, you will lose it faster in some areas over others. So therefore, we're doing the ab challenge because it's always good to have a strong, stable core. If you have a low percentage of body fat already, your abs will start coming through that. But just so that we are aware, we want to make sure that we obviously still in that calorie deficit. We're still trying to lose those calories or burn that fat. And obviously that's going to look different for different people. But guys, good luck for week 3. Again, we're going to be very involved this week in chatting to you guys. It's very important for us to make sure that we have those goals set up. We're assisting you. We're giving you the direction. Again, this plays into after the challenge, just making sure we've got realistic expectations. So the challenge is done. Essentially, your 6 weeks of the challenge, once it's done, your lifestyle shouldn't change, but hopefully it's just improved. We continue, we don't party and go back to our old ways. We've just adopted some good habits. We've got some clear-cut goals in mind, and we continue working towards a better, healthier version of ourselves.